Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself, Anne Welsh. Well, I'm truly honored to have you guys keep joining me to listen to the inspirational conversation about people living with pain or who have lived with pain and how they've managed to find their joy. Today is no exception. Today I'll be meeting my wonderful guests, where I'll be having a conversation about being an entrepreneur, leaving a bad marriage behind with your kids, and starting a business from your own kids' pain. Your child who suffers from extreme eczema, you decided to form a business and make it a profitable business that's become well known. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about my guest, Geeta. So she's a true inspirational person for anyone who's looking to understand what is truly someone of women of courage, a woman who's determined to make change, a woman who's determined to make that difference. She founded her business, the Nosh Detox, in 2008, after years of fighting her son's multiple food allergies. And with no sight in end, she decided to tackle the issue herself. She developed a nutritious balanced meal, alternative therapy, and natural supplements. Geeta found the solution as a result to manage to complete her own son's healing. In her own words, which she said previously, she used this natural method to completely cure his eczema. But this conversation will not just be focusing on this, we will focus on how she managed to achieve this business, transform from listening to her son's pain and finding a cure for it, making the business profitable. And we'll also be digging deep into her own marriage and how it was such a difficult thing for her to make that choice to leave a bad marriage and what she learned. I'm super excited to talk to her about this whole journey and share her story. I can't wait to share this inspirational conversation with you. Join me as we meet our wonderful guest in sharing this conversation. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself, Anne Welsh. As I said in my introduction, today's conversation is no different from our other conversation, but this one is truly special because today is a conversation of hope. So many women out there will be asking themselves, can I actually rise again? I can actually do it again, whatever circumstances you've been through. Or have you been through pain from your own children, from your own suffering? How have you turned your pain to joy? My guest, Geeta, will be telling you about her own story, how she's managed to build a brand, a really sustainable, big brand in the United Kingdom and around the world, helping people to detoxify. I'll be talking to her. How are you, Geeta?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
I am super excited to have you because, you are just one person who, not just your own journey. What is so inspirational about you is that your work, what you do, how you turn your pain into joy, how you turn whatever you touch into gold, I would say. But before we get started into all of that, in a few words, who are you?
Somebody asked my children that, and they said, "Mummy is half Indian, half African, and half British." So I was like, I think I'm that. I'm a Malawian that lives in Britain. Britain is my home. I'm Sikh. I'm Indian Sikh, which is my religion, and I have 3 children. And I'm ultimately, I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm a women's empowerment activist. At heart, I'm an activist, and I will be an activist till my last breath.
That's so amazing. An activist, and I love what your kids said. Because everyone these days seems to have some connection around the world, and you're half Malawian, you lived in the United Kingdom, and you have all these different origins attached to you. When you look at your background growing up in Malawi, because a lot of people might not know about the country, it's a very small country. I know Malawi because I've been there, and some people might not know about it. Can you tell us a little bit about your beautiful country, Malawi?
It's Malawi's, Malawi's called the warm heart of Africa, and it's for a very good reason. The thing that strikes you the most about Malawi, if you step out of just the echelons of power and meet everybody on the street, and I'm chair of a microloan foundation, so I helped women to set up businesses in Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. We make small loans, and you just see Two things. One is that the people are so genuinely warm and kind and, loving. My best friend is Kenyan, so I'm always laughing. I'm like, you Kenyans are really scary. Us Malawians are like really nice people. So there's the difference. Kenyans are like sharp and we're very calm and gentle. And the other thing is how much that the women are carrying the country, because we had a massive problem with AIDS. A lot of very young people who parents died, and it's grandmothers of 40 and above who are looking after the children and really making the country into the fertile kind of home that it is. And that's something that's not known about Malawi, and it's just so incredibly beautiful. Incredibly beautiful. Now I'm getting homesick.
Oh, that's really beautiful, because a lot of people just don't know. We hear about the country Malawi, and some people just don't realize how beautiful. There is poverty, but there is actually so many beautiful things that we need to start sharing the beauty of countries in Africa, of the continent. Africa.
Yeah, instead of just talking about the poverty, of course there's poverty, but here in England, if I go up the road, there's also poverty. Yeah. That's not the definition of who we are. I mean, when we had President Banda, yes, he was a dictator, but he was the first person that really championed ownership of homes for women. We had rows of houses that were only owned by women. Our illiteracy rate was lower than the United Kingdom. We had 5 years of grain reserves. And this is in those days, right? And so we, as Malawi, although small, was always very, very kind of really the place. It's not an accident that we had like the second African woman president at all.
Absolutely. I don't think that's an accident. And no one else has caught up with this up to now. I think there's still that gap in Africa and trying to find the next female leader who is going to take a big country. Your life is so interesting, because you came out over to the United Kingdom, and you came out here to do your master's in law in London School of Economics. Why did you decide to go into law? Because I see you, and you're such a creative person, and I was just wondering, what led you on this path?
Well, there's a little secret to this. It's called being Indian. So my choices were doctor, lawyer, accountant, marriage, or death. And I was like, I looked at the choices. I was like, don't like getting up, can't stand blood. Yeah, I'll go with the words. And so, I mean, there was no, we're immigrants, right? There was no room for, let's be creative and find ourselves. Nobody cared about finding ourselves. It's how do you make money? How do you get an education? How do you make money? How do you pay your parents back for everything they've ever given you? That is not different between you and me. That is 100% any African you meet. This is any brown person you meet, they're going to tell you this story, right? So that was my story. And I tried the marriage part. I was really bad at it. And I didn't, death will wait for. So I ended up, being a lawyer. Not for long. I really hated it.
Yeah, I know you do say that, because in the early 90s, you and your ex-husband, right? The reason I'm getting into these stories is I want people to understand the basics of your life, because everyone sees your life now and they imagine, oh gosh, she has it all going on for her. What is this conversation about? Where is her pain? But you've been through it all. You and your ex-husband, right? He was a property developer in the United Kingdom, and you guys had it all. Can you tell us about having it all? Because a lot of people might not understand what it means by having it all. What did you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Because women, I think, struggle to enjoy power, and I've always enjoyed power, and I've always preferred to be rich than poor. I mean, this is just, I think, choices that we don't discuss as women, whereas men do. So I've always discussed these choices. And he was not rich when I met him. We made that money together. So I didn't marry money, because it's not what I was brought up to do. I grew up in actually a very wealthy family, but when we went to school, my father was like, sayonara, baby, enjoy making your own money. I'm like, but my next door neighbor has a Porsche. He goes, tough luck to you. Go make your own. I was like, that's so rude. But we ended up having to make our own living. So I was a lawyer. He used to bring in the deals. I would land the deals and put them through. So we made millions every single year. So we were in a house that had 8 bedrooms in the middle of Chelsea, right? 8 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a 25-meter swimming pool. He liked to buy cars. We had 7 cars. I had a Ferrari with a roof. Then I had a Ferrari without a roof. I had a home in Monaco. I had a plane. We had this. So we had this insane, amazing, incredible life, which was miserable. It was awful because my husband drank. He was very violent. And this, every woman listening to this will understand it, because my son was from a previous relationship. So I brought my son into the marriage, and he was horrible. And to my son, I had 2 children with him, and he would say things like, "This is not my child, so he can't come in the car because it's my car. I paid for this car." And my daughters can. Oh, it was so bad. I don't even know what to tell you. How awful it was. And nobody could see that, because what they're seeing is this amazing, beautiful, and the worst part about this, and I think, again, a lot of women will understand this, is I went to my mother. My father was very sick at this point. He had a car crash when I was pregnant with my second child in 2000, and then he had died in 2002. And in the middle, I remember going to my mother and just saying, "You know what, I just can't bear it." Because my parents were wealthy. So I was like, "Can you just help me?" And my mother's like, "No, we're doing this for your own good. We're not going to help you because you just need to make it work, because these things happen in marriages." I'm like, getting the heck beat out of me is not a thing that should happen in my marriage. Let's be super clear about this shit. And she was like, "Yeah, no." And so she just was like, "Don't leave. These are little teething things. You'll get through them." And I'm like, "Oh, hell no, I'm not," And I remember when he almost beat up my 7-year-old son. And I was like, okay. And this is a 6'4" man. His hand, I remember his hand was like this big. It was like 1.5 the size of my hand. And, you just feel it. It's very important to talk about these things, because when you look at someone like me, you don't know those things happened. Yeah. You don't know that they're possible. And I always talk about them, because we have the BBC in this country. I remember one of the producers, I had a contract with the BBC, and he came to me and he said, "I want you to talk about your marriage." And I'm like, "I can't. I feel so much guilt and shame, because I feel like it's my fault. I took my children away from this life of luxury, and because when I walked out on him, we ended up homeless. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But he said to me, "You have to talk about it." And I was like, "I can't do it. I can't. I'm so ashamed of this." And he said, "If you don't talk about it, what will happen is other women will think it's their fault these things have happened to them."
Yes.
And I was like, okay, so if I can save one woman, one, from thinking this is her fault, I will talk about this till the cows literally come home at night. So yeah, so it was really terrible. So it was so hard, because you live in this facade. Everybody thinks your life is just amazing, because it's like, va-va-voom, and your plane and your Ferrari. And I would have given it all up. In fact, I did give it all up, because my choice, well, I was still working as a lawyer and everything. And I was like, what is more important to me? Because my children were the only thing that were important to me. They were really, everything else could go do. And to this day, everything else can go do what the heck it wants. It's always going to be for me about the kids. Let's not tell them that, because they're teenagers. So we don't need to. Let's not tell them that. We'll keep that a secret between you, me, and our listeners.
Exactly. No, go on.
But we walked out one day. I just picked up the kids and I walked out, and it was just too much. And I can't even remember. Yeah, I had made savings, from when you're 20 something. I had put savings aside for my son, and it was such small amounts. I was putting aside £20 a week or something. So by this stage, I had several thousands of pounds saved up. And I gave it to him, and I said, "I don't know how to invest this." And he was very good with money and making it. And I was like, he's like, yeah, let me invest it. Turned out he drank it. Oh. And my son had no money. And he just wouldn't tell me where. It took me so long to find out. It had just disappeared. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds had gone, because I was like, I need to provide for my son. I'm alone with my son. Let me, and years of my work. Yeah. And I was like, okay. So I picked up and I walked out, and I had £200 and some, our credit cards and our bank accounts and everything. And I was like, we made this together. He'll give me half. It's okay. It took him 1.5 hours to ring, and all the bankers helped him, because they were also all white men. Yeah. And they helped, and I went and got an injunction, and they just literally would park the injunction on one side, close down the bank account and say, "Oh, it came too late." So I ended up in 3 days, I ended up with no money, no cards, and he bankrupted me. And so, no, and I had a 7-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. I remember we were holding the nappies under one hand. And the girl opposite me, the woman opposite me, had said, no, come stay. But you what are you doing staying in this woman's house? You don't really know her. She's your neighbor. And she wasn't like my friend. I was like, we'll get a place, we'll do whatever. There just was nowhere. And
Wow.
it's really interesting to go from that lifestyle to suddenly being bankrupt. So I lost my job. Corporate lawyers and bankrupt corporate lawyers are not in great demand. I had these kids, and then I remember coming down to like 14 pounds. And the kids are having to go to school, and the uniform and the this and the that, and I had one suitcase with all of our things. And so my girlfriend said, no, come. So she gave me a room, and the children slept on the bed, and I put the sofa, and then the baby was a baby, so we put her in a little cot because she wasn't going to come out of the cot, and then we put the sofa cushions on the floor, and I slept on the sofa cushions on the floor for the next 6.5 months.
So in 2002, right, you had to go through all this pain, and you decided to walk out with your ex-husband with your kids. You were you said you were 2 million in debt from the businesses. You were evicted from your home, and your marriage fell apart. Geeta, one thing I will ask you is, women are going through the pandemic pain. A lot of people are coming out. The world is difficult right now. A lot of people are struggling. Their marriages is falling apart, and they can't see what tomorrow will bring. Can you tell us words of advice to someone going through that pain? How did you do it?
The interesting thing about women, I always say that what I did was not necessarily that remarkable. The level to which I determined to do it was possibly slightly unusual. Because for me, I determined that I was entitled to money, wealth, Chanel, let's be clear, Dior, because I was like, you know what, if I'm going to suffer, can I please suffer in absolute designer, which is so funny because I don't even buy designer things. But I was entitled to that. And my children were entitled to the best education I could give them. And so those were my starting points. And what was really great is that I always think in life, you get the minimum of what you require. So my minimum requirement, and I honestly bless my ex-husband every day for this, because I wanted my children to stay in their private school. And he looked at me, and I was really struggling, obviously, to pay the fees. I had 14 pounds for food. Where was I going to get money for fees? And I remember, and it was like 1,500 pounds per child per term, right? And then it went up and up and up. And I remember him saying to me, if you had just stayed with me, I could come back, just come back. I'll pay the fees, because he had literally taken all this money. So he was very rich. And I remember looking at him and thinking, and then my mother said, no man is ever going to want you with 3 kids. I was like, by the way, there's a queue of them. Let's be really clear. There's a queue of them, and each one is richer than the last one. She goes, well, marry one, and then you'll that money, and then you'll be taken care of. I was like, and I remember thinking, none of you people want or give a shit about how I and my children feel. You want me to conform. You want me to behave in a way so I'm not a problem for you. And what it is that concept of always being a good girl. This is what I coach to these days. I'm like, let's be the opposite of a good girl. And I remember looking at this, and I promise you it was the hardest thing, because everyone hated me. Everyone was pushing me. Everyone was pulling me, because a weak, powerless woman, a good-looking, weak, powerless woman, is bait. And we never say these things, and I always say them. I'm very open about this stuff, because you are bait. Because the easiest thing is just let some nice man do this. And I had just come from letting a nice man do whatever it was that he was doing. And I was like, never, ever again. That was my one commitment. Never again. My mother locked up her house, her empty house, and she left town. My ex-husband got a really pretty house in the country and said, come and visit whenever you want. And I was still on the floor. And I remember thinking to myself, how do I make sure this never happens to me and to us ever again? And I didn't know, but I knew there was an answer. I knew, because I was brought up in a very God-believing household. And I have the coolest religion. It's like, just believe in God and do good things. That's it. There's no fundamentalism. There's no freakiness. It's all fantastic. It's just like, everybody's welcome. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And I had a book. And I still have a book like this. I had this little book like this, and you open it up. I honestly still do this every day. And it's like that inside. And I would draw a line down the middle, and I put the date at the top. And on the left-hand column, I would write things I have to do today. And in the right hand, I would write things the universe or God has to do for me today. So on the left-hand side were things I have to do today, which is, I don't know, find how to feed the family for 14 pounds, find 5,000 pounds for school. No, that was in the universe's column because I didn't know how to do that. Get a new pair of shoes, go and do this, look for work, get a contract, this. Say thank you to my friend. Then on the right-hand side were the things I didn't know how to do. I had no idea how I was going to pay school fees. And my children stayed in private school till they finished school. Till they finished. It is insanely wonderful because honestly, it was impossible. Yes. It was impossible. I had no idea how that was going to happen. And I gave it up. Part of it, I just gave up. And I was like, okay, here's my determination. Here's my commitment. And my commitment was also, to be fair, that I was never, ever going to subject myself to a man to tell me what to do again. Does not mean I don't have relationships and that. It was just never to put myself at the mercy of a man with money when I had none. Yeah. So I didn't understand this at the time, but what I had set a level of self-respect and self-esteem for myself. And I refused to budge from that. And I was like, I will filter I didn't know those words then, because that's not who I was brought up to be. I was an Indian girl from my background, grew up in Africa. I was told to just do what I was told and smile while you're doing it. And can you please look good while you're doing it too, right? And I had 2 pairs of shoes for 6 months. I had, that's why I helped the microloan women in Malawi and places, because I'm like, you're poor and you're bringing up your children. And I was poor and I was bringing up my children. The only thing that changes us is geography and education.
That is so true.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
When you look back at it, because you started your company from this.
I did.
From all of this pain, when you realized you've left him, why did you decide to start the company then? How did that come about?
It came about, as most things are, like from another tragedy. My son was very ill when he was allergic to an injection he was given. There was a protein in it that he was allergic to. This took me 30 years to work out. And he had eczema, then he had asthma, then he became anaphylactic. And so he would eat something and then he would start to die in front of my eyes because his body would just swell up and everything. And in fact, at one stage he had cardiorespiratory arrest. And he died. They had to resuscitate him and he was in a coma. Now, ironically, this happened before I met this husband. And that's why I married him. Because I was like, let me provide a father for my child. Let me, how you think these things. Let me provide him with siblings so he's not alone. He has such a hard life. His poor baby is so sick and everything. But from that, I learned how to help women whose children had allergies, because there was nothing in the world in those days. And so I used to write books about it. I did talks about it. I went on TV, I spoke about it. And then it was a natural thing where here I was, how do I make money? I don't know how to make money. So the thing I know how to do is teach you about your body. Yeah. And I used to say I can change anyone's body, and I actually can. But now I realize that you have to change the mindset as well. So it's evolved. So that's how the business came about.
And I think what you just said is very true. A lot of women are very good at telling you the ideas. They could teach you about what they're good at. But one thing about it is transferring. Okay, we've had the conversation. How do you transfer that into monetary skills? So can you share with us what you did that helped this business in the monetary phases to make it a business?
Well, number one, I really hated being poor. Just let's be clear. I've been rich and I've been poor. And I was like, I hate being poor. I remember thinking this poor business really sucks. We must give it up. And it sounds really funny, but it was actually a decision. I don't like being poor. I'm going to change this. And the thing and so I had a few decisions within which I had a framework to operate, because I was acting as a corporate negotiator, and I flew into Rwanda and Kenya and Belarus and Russia and everywhere to negotiate contracts and come back out. It's like The Pursuit of Happiness. I saw that film and I was like, this was my life. I had a small window in which to operate, make the money come home, because if I left my children, my son would start to get sick or die or whatever. So I would like, so I was like, I need to build something here so I can work from home. So I can stay home. I can look after the children. We're sitting now in my home. My office has never changed to be in my home. There's a juice bar, there's an office. I never work anywhere but from home, because there's an idiot child upstairs doing an exam, which she forgot to tell me she had, but that's yet another story. So I was like, I have to work from home. How do I do that? Okay. Then I remember holding my son and he was looking in the fridge and he goes, Mama, I can't eat anything in the fridge. I can't eat anything that's in the fridge. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, it gives me a headache thinking about it now. You're as happy as your unhappiest child.
Yes.
And I was like, okay. So I was like, well, let me make food that you can eat. And then I started to deliver that food to the schools and to whatever, because he was always having to eat separately to everyone because he would get sick and it was just horrible. And then when I started to do that, then I ended up delivering lunches to Coca-Cola because it was healthy food. And I was like, this is really not what I wanted to do. Why am I a caterer? Oh, and my mother was having the best time. You went from being a lawyer to a caterer and she was not being complimentary. And then I was like, okay, there must be another version. And then I remember I closed the business for like a month. And I had to think about it. And I was like, okay, we need to make money by the 7th of January. And it was now the beginning of December. So I actually was like, okay, I'm going to open the new business on the 6th of January. I had no idea what we were going to do, but I was like, something is going to happen. So I always call it putting a flag in the ground, put a flag in the ground and then go from there. And so I was like, okay, 6th of January, we're going to start making money because we need it by the 7th. So oops. And I was like, all right, I'm going to start delivering the first ever business in this country that delivered dairy, gluten, egg, nut-free food, allergy-free food around the country. So first we started in London. I met the chef on the 4th of January because I cannot cook. I'm a good African child where I'm just like somebody somewhere really did that cooking because it wasn't me. So I met the chef on the 4th of January. I met the delivery driver. He was dropping pizza off in front of me. And I said, excuse me, do you work nights? He goes, no, I work in the daytime. I'm like, would you like a job that works? He's like, yeah, I'd love one. I need more work. I'm like, come and pick up food on the 6th. I met him on the 5th. I got 2 clients that day. So we did our first delivery on the 6th. And then we made £100,000 that year in the business.
That is fantastic. So it's all about,
honestly, is how it happened.
It's all about putting that flag in the sand and saying, this is it. I have to now, I have to turn this conversation from wanting to do this to now doing it and making it a business because I want to have money. I don't want to do something that's just a hobby. Because I think this is where the fine line where a lot of women cross, they do things and it becomes a hobby rather than making it a sustainable business. And this is something you did. But how did you know there was a gap in the market for this when the business started growing? When did you know that this was something that needed to be done?
I think when people kept calling me on TV to shout at me, they kept calling. We invented Juice Fast. Juice Fast didn't exist. So I put juices in bottles and started to deliver them. We're the first company that did that in 2008. And people would put me on TV and yell at me and go, oh my God, telling people to do Juice Fast, telling them not to eat. And then I remember this one woman and she was so pale. Her hair was white, her face was white, her dress was white. She was really pale, sitting next to me and there's all this color, And she said, you can't ask people to give up bread. I'm like, what are they going to do? Go into bread shock? Really, honestly, what a conversation to have. Yeah. And yeah, people would call me and shout at me. And I was like, so there's obviously a need for this because you wouldn't be shouting at me if there wasn't something about this. And then it became a question of getting people to pay attention because, I'm a brown single parent. Who gives a shit? Nobody cared about me. If you were blonde and you were setting up a business, they got you on instantly. Yeah. I couldn't afford PR. Couldn't afford any of those things. So I was like, So I found people that now are called influencers. But in those days, you had like 300 followers. And I was like, hi, do you want some free food? Do you want some free juice? Do you want this? Do you want this? And then we started. And then what happened, really, honestly, this is the absolute truth. 3 years after I set up the business, this terrifying woman rang me. She said, hello, my name is blah, 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 blah. I'm like, She said, I'm calling from Vogue. I was like, oh shit. I was like, okay. And I'm still waiting for someone to tell me, you're dead, go away. Because at this stage, now let's be clear, my ex was trying everything to destroy me he could. He was ringing up the papers and saying I was a thief. He was telling clients that I had stolen. I mean, he was trying everything to destroy my business that he could do. He was really, it was really bad. Like I got given an award for, so my goddaughter, who's Kenyan, came to live with us, but she didn't have anywhere to stay. So I was like, she came and stayed with us. And she nominated for me for an award, which was at number 11 Downing Street, which was really sweet of them, like Mothers at Work, something, because it was the story of coming, you know, Phoenix Rising. And he rang up the newspapers the day after I got the award saying that I was a thief being let into Downing Street, and the papers just came after me. It was just, so this man was doing everything. Let's be clear, he didn't go away because I was making him look bad. Now, why do you not disappear? Why do you not just go away so that no one can see you and you can't be reminding people that I left you with no money? Why are you talking to the papers, going from riches to rags? Because then I look like a bad man. And I was like, oh, do you? Oops.
All of a sudden, I didn't realize you look like a bad man.
Oh, and I really give zero shits about that, by the way.
Yeah.
We should be very clear. And so this woman rang me and she goes, yes, Gwyneth Paltrow, when she was asked what her favorite detox was, recommended you. I was like, oh. She goes, did you know? I'm like, not really, had no clue. She goes, well, she did. Could I possibly have a delivery? I'm like, are you going to pay me? And she went, yes, of course. Would you not give it to us free for the press? I'm like, we're too small. We really can't afford to give you free anything. Yeah. And she was annoying. Yeah, so Gwyneth Paltrow recommended us. I'm like, can you just record that little phrase and I'll bring down my whole website and I'll write Gwyneth Paltrow recommends me across the homepage and ignore everything else. Do you know what I mean? And God bless the woman, because the product we had was just phenomenal. It was unusual, it worked, and we were really authentic. We didn't do anything that didn't work. If it worked, we did it and we charged you a lot. And if it didn't work, we didn't do it. And we never took no for an answer. So it was always, how do we help the women? How do we help the women? How do we help the women? And I've never stopped doing that.
Okay, being an entrepreneur, you're now a successful entrepreneur, businesswoman. How is this business now doing? What do you do now to help other women, the other young girls who are looking to follow your footsteps and, you know, build their own businesses and not quite sure where to start?
The thing is, it's always important to remember that businesses go up and they go down. So like the pandemic hurt us a lot. There were parts of the business that just died, and there were, like, in 4 days, you would have, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds disappear overnight. So we struggled in the pandemic as much as everyone. So it's important to say those things because you should always know that this is what happens. And what we did is we pivoted. And the secret to keeping a successful business alive is to pivot and match your circumstances. So we rang 1,500 women at the beginning of the pandemic and we said, what is your problem? And they were like, we're stressed and we're fat. And we hate our lives. So we created a program of coaching, which was to help you with stress fat. And we created the concept of stress fat because women didn't understand why they were getting fat. And now we've done that. We're adding in perimenopause. And so coaching has become a massive part of my business. And so what I do now is I speak all the time about women. I have a Lead Like a Woman. So it's the feminization of women, how you need to be less of a good girl and more of a leader, because women are natural leaders. We really are natural, effective leaders. In the pandemic, it's the women that succeeded, the women leaders. So I talk about that, and I will go on every stage that will have me to talk about this, because it's so important to make women understand that the way we're brought up, we're punished when we try and act for ourselves.
Absolutely. I'm so proud.
And we are rewarded for acting for other people. And so, yes, I act for other people, but it's my children and it's my choice. And the rest of the time, you should literally go jump off a cliff because I don't care.
And, you know, one other thing I'm fascinated about yourself is the balancing of that. You said you had your first son from a previous marriage, and then you had your 2 girls. And when you left, one of the things that you're so good at is that balancing. Because being a mother, you know, the way you talk, people forget that you actually had 3 kids that you were actually balancing, and you were then building on this business. How did you balance it, both?
Oh, I mean, you don't, do you? I'm a mother, so I spent my whole life thinking I'm not doing enough, I'm guilty, I'm ashamed, I'm this, I'm that. So keeping my son alive was a really big priority, actually keeping him alive. And he's now kind of built like a brick house. And now it's like, oh my God, do you have a job? You know, so it's that thing. I don't know if my children would think I did a good job, but I can't do that. I have to do it for me. And for me, my priority was super clear to anyone, anywhere, anyhow. My kids were first. I did all of this for the kids, but not like my parents. Oh, we did everything for you. I did everything for you. Go off and do whatever you're doing, kind of thing. And I like them. I wish they liked me as much as I like them. I want to hang out with them, and they're like, can we just go hang out with our friends? And can you just pay the bill? You know. So they're completely normal kids. But I remember my daughter. I tell you the really interesting thing. My elder daughter said to me about a week ago. She goes, "Mama, we go to Cornwall for holidays every year," and she goes, "Mama, I didn't understand. We went to Cornwall for holidays because we were poor." And I was like, "Well, babe, everybody went to South France and I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to take us anywhere. And the only place we could afford to go was because we owned a car. So and I want to cry when I think about it, but we got in the car and we drove there because it was the cheapest place I could do. And the children could still say, we're going on holiday because the beach didn't cost money. And it was at the end of the road. It's 5 hours at the end of the road. And it's so funny that she only realized that about a week ago.
Oh, that's lovely. That's better.
You know, to me, that's success.
That is success.
And she's 22.
Oh, good. So you loved it well. So what you're really saying here is that there's no balancing act. We just have to go with the flow,
There's
do
no
our
balance.
best, and love the kids as much as we can, and hopefully they love us back and give us the same love when we require it. And I have to ask you, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say what did take a back seat sometimes was being a woman. And I had to really train myself to give the woman in me a space.
What do you mean?
Because I was a mother, I was an entrepreneur, I was all of those things. I was semi-public figure because I was always on stage or on TV, but there wasn't a place where I was a woman because I wasn't the easiest woman to date. And I was just like, how do you, so that really, I sort of paid a price for that there, here and there. And then I kind of thought, okay. And then I would have to constantly, because that was the me part of me, right? So I would constantly have to remember to allow that bit to come out.
This is fascinating. I've never thought about it, but that's very true with entrepreneurs, mothers, or if you've gone through any kind of divorce. Being a woman again is actually quite difficult because you never want to let that guard down again. You never want to let your kids that vulnerable state again. So you forget again how to be a woman, because women, we have to be vulnerable a little bit. We have to show some kind of emotion, some kind of love. That's what men expect.
It's the definition of femininity.
Yes, and sometimes it's difficult when you have to be all this thing from your business, for your kids, for your family. Being from Africa myself, being from Nigeria, it's always that. What is a woman? You are that lady who sits and just take it. It doesn't matter what they say to you, just take it. And you're like, why do we take it? Why do you just take it?
Well, funny you should say that, because the thing that I learned, which I now teach, is that if you look at me, the thing is I'm a very powerful woman.
You are.
But I'm unquestionably a woman, right? So I'm very feminine and very powerful. And that's the hardest balance, because for us, femininity is exactly what you said, where you're weak and vulnerable. You didn't say weak, you said vulnerable, but we feel weak when we're vulnerable. And what I've learned in the last 15 years is how to be powerful and feminine. And that's what I now teach, because your biggest power comes from being the real version of who you are.
That's absolutely true.
It's like being a Japanese in Germany. You're always a bit weird because you're in Germany. It's not your language, it's not your thing. And that's what we do. We imitate men to try and succeed. And it hurts us.
Yes.
Whereas if you can be, the Japanese person that I had who worked for a German company, I told him, make everybody speak English, because then you're all on a level playing field, So the thing that I really, I grew up around people with power, but they didn't tell me I was allowed any of it. In fact, they told me none of it was mine. If I wanted power, I had to marry it or I had to sleep with it, but I wasn't allowed mine.
To own your own power.
And if you look at you and you look at me, what we are doing that is unusual is that we are powerful in ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that is something I want to teach every woman in the world, because that's what you need to know. Because when you're powerful, the choices that you make have to come from you as a woman. Because you cannot be powerful as an entrepreneur and weak as a woman. You cannot be powerful as a mother and weak as a woman. You can't be powerful everywhere and not as a woman. So what I had to teach myself was that as a woman, I would become incredibly powerful and love that about me. And then everything else was fine.
That's wonderful. I have to ask you this one about your business. You help clients to start living this healthier life. And during the pandemic, you said one other thing, you diversified into helping more women, calling women up and asking them what they needed. And they found this niche area about sitting down at home and women putting on weight during that time. How do you do this in terms of advising clients and making sure that you get the best out of them?
So what we did was so I've always had a lot of celebrity clients, a lot, because God bless Gwyneth Paltrow. And from the beginning, I mean, we were also unusual because we were the first, you know, and so I had a lot of, and so I deal with celebrities every day, and they're a very particular breed of people. But what I wanted was an ability for normal women to have access to what I was doing. So that's what I set up at the beginning of lockdown. And it took me about 8 months to work it out. So now we basically have an online program that you can enter that has all the training set up in the back end. And then I set up phone calls, and I do 1 phone call a week with everybody. And I take them through the training, and they just have access to it for the life of the program, because how easy can I make it? And I have this lovely woman in Tanzania who pays me like £200 a month or something, which is a lot of money where she comes from. Yeah. But this is what she wants to do. So there are people from all over the world, and everything that you need to learn, I just put it into this portal. And so I took the fact that women were stuck, and I gave them a place where they could access freedom inside themselves.
Finally, my final question. How can people who find it hard, like you being through that difficult, painful circumstances, you know, difficult life, and a lot of people stay there, let's be honest. A lot of people don't leave. You know, you're one of the brave few out there that decided to grab your kids and leave and say, you know what, I can do it, because you had so many obstacles against you. You had your family, your mom believed that you could stay and make it work. Your other half, ex-husband, believed that you should stay, even though it wasn't right for you to stay. So many people are in that situation right now, and they find that decision to leave really hard. How can people leave and make that positive change in their life? What would you advise somebody going through it right now to?
I mean, I think that you should only leave when you are ready. But the way I knew because it's always different for everyone, right? I wouldn't wish what had happened to me on anyone. But the way I did it was this. I wanted to leave such a long time. And people would be like, why don't, like every time the police were called, you know, they're like, why don't you leave? And I'm like, and go where? With what money? You know, kind of thing. Eventually he stopped actually hitting me because the police put him in jail for one night. And I don't know what they did to him, but he never touched me again. It was a very good thing, really. They were really lovely. Honestly, they were so nice. The police. What I did is I stayed until I knew that no matter what happened, I was never going to come back. Because that was the worst thing, where you go and you come and you go and you come. I was like, I'm staying till I have learned who you are, till I have understood what I am doing, till I developed enough inside me to know what the hell is going on here, so I never, ever, ever come back to this place. That was when I left. I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, but that's when I left.
That is really helpful. Yeah, well, it's really, really helpful, because I think in any circumstances, any pain you're going through, it's best to know when you're ready. So what you're saying is that you have to individually know when it's ready for you, because everyone's circumstances is different. So you just have to know when it's right.
You know what it's like? It's like climbing a mountain. Every step you take, put the flag down, tuck your rope in there, and you know you can't go back. Yeah. Then take the next step, put the flag in there, screw in that rope, and then you're there. Then take the next step, put in the rope, and you know you're there. It's that one step. This is all, it sounds all amazing, whatever, but there was no drama. It all took step by step. I just had very, very high ambitions. Nobody needs to have my ambitions. Put one step, make sure you never go back. One step, make sure you never go back. And that's what I do with coaching. I teach people the things that mean they will never go back.
That's true. Wow, this is so fascinating. I really enjoyed talking to you, because now if anyone else didn't learn, I learned a thing or two, because I learned about life that, you know what, we have to believe in ourselves and never be afraid to use our courageous self. We all have that in us. We just have to find it. It doesn't matter what the world tells you. It doesn't matter what your loved one, your family, your loved one tells you. If you believe it within yourself, you need to go for it. Thank you so much for this conversation.
I'm so happy to have been here. Thank you.
I am so glad you did, because I've learned so much about yourself, and I've learned so much about the courageous person you are, and how it is important that we must all find our joy and live our life to the fullest. Thank you.
Such a pleasure.